From Fox 8 Sports, this is the Overtime Podcast.
From the Fox 8 studios in New Orleans, this is the Fox 8 Overtime Podcast. I'm your host, Sean Fazende, riding shotgun as he does each and every podcast. This is Andre Johnson.
Junior.
Do not forget the Junior. It's very important to remember the JR at the end of the name. Before we get into today's content, be sure to like, share, rate, review. If you are watching us on YouTube, hit that subscribe button, get the bell notification for when we drop that fire content. And also, hello to the Gulf Coast Sports and Entertainment Network. Glad you have found us here. So thank you for watching. It is Thursday. Unless you're watching us on the Gulf Coast Sports and Entertainment Network, it's actually Friday. But on YouTube today, it is Thursday. Given the fluidity of the moves, we wanted to get a podcast out today because a lot's changing. A lot can change. So we didn't want to tape a day ahead of time. But it is Thursday. You had a couple things you were doing today outside of football. Now you're back. How you feeling today?
Feeling good. You know, just left Xavier. They're hosting the first two rounds of the NAIA tournament.
Oh, good for them.
Actually having one of their greatest seasons of all time, the women of Xavier. So good luck to them in the upcoming tournament, along with Loyola, Dillard, and the men of Xavier all competing in the NAIA tournament over the weekend.
Our next door neighbor, Xavier University. So yes, good for them. Good for them. All right, we are now in the. Oh man, this stuff moves so fast. So it's Thursday, so stuff started Monday, but that's like an eternity of time in between because so many moves have happened since the last time we spoke. So let's just do a checklist of everything that's happened just since the last time we talked. Cam Jordan reworked the contract, guys. He agreed to lower his base salary. He can make it back in workable incentives, just like Tyrann Mathieu did. Probably very makeable incentives, but it will depend on how often he's on the football field. He is going to close out his career in New Orleans, which is what he and everyone truly wanted. Again, not everybody has that kind of leverage to say, no, I'm not taking a quote-unquote pay cut. Call it whatever you want. He's back. So that's good. It's good. What else? Today, Will Clapp, Brother Martin, LSU, former Saint, 7th-round pick, carved a nice little career out for himself. Yep. He returns on a one-year deal. Nice move, veteran depth along the offensive line. It's hard to come by, and they are so valuable, as we saw last year. Also, they brought back cornerback Isaac Yiadom, a guy you liked, a guy I liked. He was here a couple of years ago, filled in when there was a lot of injuries to that secondary. They did not miss a beat when he was on the football field. A 3-year deal for Isaac Yiadom. So a player that, again, spot starter, secondary depth, cornerback depth. Given what they've lost and what they've gained, I think it was certainly necessary to address the cornerback position. Again, I don't know if I would pencil him in as a starter, but he can start for you. So I got to tell you, I like today's – and Jack Stoll, the tight end from Philadelphia, a blocking tight end, has obviously a lot of connections with Kellen Moore. He's a player that played a lot of special teams. He was actually the third on their depth chart for the Philadelphia Eagles. He is a run-blocking tight end that plays special teams. That's where – he will make some noise, or he will make the roster for the Saints. So 3 veteran guys, 3 depth guys. They're not going to be, I guess everyone knows who Will Clapp is because of his story. But, these are guys, these are glue guys. And in my opinion, these are the type of guys that they kind of missed last year with a little bit of a hollowed-out roster when the injuries came. And these are the type of guys that you really lean on for depth. So I think it was a good day.
Yeah, we called Justin Reed a splash when the Saints got him on Wednesday. This may not be or Tuesday, whenever they got him.
What was that?
I think it was Wednesday.
Yeah, you're right.
This may not be the splash, but it's important because, like you mentioned, depth is what this team lacked last year, especially on the offensive line, because we saw Taliese Fuaga exit games. We saw, Lucas Patrick get hurt. We saw Cesar Ruiz get hurt. Eric McCoy got injured. Pretty much everybody but the Iron Man, Trevor Penning, got injured at some point last year, and we saw so many different combinations across that offensive line. And the biggest problem is something we identified day one. They didn't have a lot of depth. So will Clapp be a definitive starter day one? Probably not, but he's depth and he's important. And there's a chance he could. You never know.
That's a great utility guy to have. He's got a lot of starts. He's got a lot of experience. He's played a lot of different roles, and he knows exactly who he is. He's 29 years old. So he's a guy that I think can certainly contribute.
Yeah, and the city loves their own. And speaking of their own, a guy that's coming back to New Orleans, Isaac Yiadom. If you remember, if you were listening to this pod about a year and some change ago, I was big on Isaac Yiadom, a guy who was essentially unknown before that 2023 season, and he was able to get in because of injuries, and he really made his presence felt. He had he was probably top 10 if I remember in the league in pass breakups that season. He had an interception against Tampa. I remember because I just so happened to be on the field shooting that game, caught it right in front of me. Isaac Yiadom, and he had some bad moments too. There were some times where he got picked on, so I'm not here to say he's like a top 10 corner in the league, but Isaac Yiadom, for what he was asked to do and everything that was going on at the time, Isaac Yiadom stepped in and did a really good job. So I'm excited to see him back in the cornerback room that needs some help. And then you mentioned Jack Stoll. I mean, somebody who's made his mark on special teams. I'm sure he'll be able to do the same for the Saints. So 3 picks, 3 acquisitions that may go under the radar, but at the end of the day, I think they'll help the Saints more than it hurts them.
So look, I wasn't being rude looking at my phone. I was checking to make sure nothing had broke. If you see me do that during this pod, that's what it is. It's not. I'm not ignoring what Andre's saying. I'm trying to make sure that we don't miss anything. So let's just look at it right now. The free agent class, as it stands right now, is Reed, the safety. Right. Devon Gottschall. I think I would consider him a free agent acquisition, even if they got him in a trade.
Pretty much.
Isaac Yiadom, Will Clapp, and Jack Stoll. So that's one splash and one other starter. I think Gottschall is going to get on the field a lot, and then you have 3 guys that can bring some valuable depth. I mean, it's okay. It's fine. I don't have a problem necessarily with it. They made some other moves that I thought were pretty questionable, but had a lot more to do with their own guys. But the question now is, and this is where we're going to go with the big picture, is, okay, we've gone through whatever wave this is, wave 1, wave 2. The market has reset. The board has reset because now the depth chart is here. I went and wrote the depth chart out, or just the roster out, what they have at each position. The question now is, okay, what's next? Where should they target? Not just who, but where should they target? Because there's still a lot of free agents out there, and the Saints have their needs to start free agency aren't the same needs, at least from a pressing need standpoint, as we get to day 4, day 5 free agency here.
Definitely, and the short answer for me is everywhere. I mean, this is a roster that still needs a lot of help as you look top to bottom, offense to defense, special teams, quarterback, running back, receiver. And we're going to kind of take you through all of those positions today. That'll be our quote-unquote big picture. We're going to stop through every position, quarterback, running back, receiver, evaluate the guys that they have there, and simply say, do they need help here? Do they not?
All right, let's start. You ready to go?
Let's get it.
All right, look, I did a pod. It was my last solo pod that I did on this. So we're going to start at quarterback.
All right.
Derek Carr, Spencer Rattler, Jake Haener. Okay, I made the case that the Saints should consider a veteran because the Saints have had to depend on their backup quarterback every season since 2019. And there was a clear line of success or lack thereof before Derek Carr and now since they've added Derek Carr. Spencer Rattler had some good moments last year, but they were just small moments. They weren't for a full stretch of games to get any wins. Jake Haener obviously looked lost in his start. His lone start. Didn't last a full game. So to me, I would have absolutely no problem if the Saints say, let's target a veteran, and that veteran will pencil him in to come in to compete for the backup job to Spencer Rattler, because history has shown you're having to depend on these guys. And what do I always say? Depending on a backup quarterback, what do I want them to do? I want a guy that's going to keep me afloat. I want a guy that's going to help me stay around 500. Teddy Bridgewater got him 5-0. Taysom Hill in 2020 went 3-1. 2021, if you recall, Jameis goes down. Simeon went 0-4 or 0-5, but then Taysom comes back and goes 3-1 that year, or 4-1, something like that. 2022, a little different because Jameis goes down. They turn to Andy. Andy doesn't give the job back, but still he went 6-8. Again, around 500. Now you look to 23, where obviously no other quarterback started, but they exited 3 games. They lost all 3. Carr did. And in the 7 games this past year, they lost all 7. So to me, this is an area, if you're the Saints, it doesn't jump. Huge need, especially with the Derek Carr scenario, at least not in free agency. But to me, I would have no problem if they looked at a veteran backup to compete with Spencer Rattler for the 2.
That's what I would look for, and it kind of becomes difficult when you look at some of the quarterbacks that have already been signed, because a lot of the guys who you would kind of point to at the beginning of the free agency, like, oh, he can help us, maybe a Sam Darnold, if you believe in him after what he did in Minnesota. He's gone. Justin Fields, he's gone. Even Kenny Pickett, who we kind of had our eye on because the connection to Kellen Moore. He's gone. So when you really start looking, there's a lot of guys who, like you said, they're just quality backups. They're guys who have the experience to do it. I believe at this moment, one of them is actually very popular in the city, Jameis Winston. He's still out there, you know. We know that Derek Carr is going to be the starting quarterback. We know that nobody is going to take Derek Carr's job on this team if he is healthy. What we don't know is if there's a backup quarterback on this roster who's able to take over if something does happen to him, because we saw last year, and if there's any reason to lean one particular way, it's to lean no, because Spencer Rattler, you can say, oh, injuries and everything. Spencer Rattler didn't win a single game he played last year. Jake Haener played in one game. He did so well, he got benched at halftime. So when you look around, I think that backup quarterback is a position that you have to address in this free agency. Even if it is bringing back a guy like Jameis Winston, nobody's going to complain in the fan base if you bring Jameis back. And even bringing Jameis back doesn't pencil him in at the number 2 position. He's still got to compete with Rattler. He's still got to compete with Haener if this team decides to carry Haener into next year. And young quarterbacks can learn a lot from that kind of competition.
And I think it's necessary.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's necessary. And, you know, again, it could change, but I don't think Gardner Minshew has signed anywhere, has he?
I don't think so.
I don't think Cooper Rush has signed anywhere, has he?
Nope.
Those are the two I've always mentioned as those are relief pitchers in the NFL. They're not going to be starters, at least not start. You know, they're not full-time starters. They're not good enough to do it over a long period of time. But in a short window, those guys can help you, and I think the Saints have to prepare for that. I don't think they have any other choice. All right, moving on. Running back, Alvin Kamara, Kendre Miller, Jordan Mims. I say yes. Look for a veteran at this point. I don't know what's available, but if there is someone that you can get fairly cheap, I think they're going to draft a running back. But I still think you would need to at least look at the running back position.
I have yes, but I put an asterisk next to it because for me it's yes, unless you're doing what we've talked about on this podcast and you're looking at that first-round draft pick that you've got and you're matching it to a particular running back that went crazy at Boise State last year.
It could happen.
If you're looking at Ashton Jeanty, I'm not pressed if you don't sign a running back in free agency because you've still got Kendre Miller, you've still got Jordan Mims. Now, we know Kendre Miller's health issues and everything going along with that, but if you're planning to draft one, then I'm not – it's not a big deal to me if you don't necessarily sign one, especially if you're able to bring back a Taysom Hill who we know can kind of step into that role and pretty much any role on this team if needed.
I wouldn't call it like the highest of needs, but I still think that's something you would consider. All right, tight end. Juwan Johnson, Foster Moreau, Jack Stoll, Taysom Hill, who hasn't – there's no adjustment to his contract yet as far as I know, and there's a couple practice squad guys, Jacobson and Welch. I don't think you need to worry about just the rest of free agency. Now, if you want to go with that
Gardner
way in the
Minshew
draft,
to the Kansas City Chiefs.
Oh, there we go.
They will not be signing
all right.
Gardner Minshew.
All right. See, that's why we check the phones. That's why we check. All right, good. Gardner Minshew to the Chiefs. That's a good signing for them. I don't know. Mahomes has never hurt, but
there's their relief pitcher right there.
Best relief pitcher in the game. All right. Tight end, Juwan Johnson, Foster Moreau, Stoll, Taysom, Jacobson, Welch. Look, if you want to address this in the draft, that's fine, but I think you're probably set via free agency. I think you're probably good. Look, we already said, or at least I believe, they overpaid for Juwan Johnson. By the way, his contract is 12th in the NFL in tight ends. He's not the 12th best tight end in the NFL.
He's not had the 12th best production.
I would say he's probably somewhere like 18 or 19.
Yeah.
So they did overpay for him a little bit, at least in my opinion. What do you think, tight end?
Tight end is one of the few positions where I put no at because when I was looking at some of the available free agents, and honestly, whatever you could say about Juwan Johnson, I don't think there's anybody out there right now who's better than Juwan Johnson. I mean, Evan Ingram was the only guy in that tight end market who I would look at and say he could be an upgrade at the position, and he chose to go play in Denver with Sean Payton. So instead of looking out into the free agency and trying to bring in a new guy, I think what you need to focus on right now is keeping Foster Moreau. Because Foster Moreau had a big impact in that tight end room last season. If you can re-sign him, figure out the deal there, I think that would help you next season.
Yeah, I agree. All right, moving on. Wide receiver. You ready for this?
Oh, yeah.
Chris Olave, Rashid Shaheed, Cedric Wilson, Dante Pettis, Bub Means, Kevin Austin, Mason Tipton. Y-E-S. Y-E-S. Yes, that's what I want. I want the Saints to target a veteran free agent in the wide receiver room with some skins on a wall, with just some veteran moxie, or I don't know what you want to call it. Just I need a guy that's been through it, because I think this room has been missing that for so long. Olave has been hurt. It was just a turnstile last year. They lost Marquez Valdez-Scantling. Would have had no problem bringing him back. Shaheed has been hurt. Olave has been hurt. Tipton never developed. Cedric Wilson never developed. Dante Pettis was a guy you had to lean on late last year because there was nobody else. Bub Means the guy that got hurt. And Kevin Austin's the guy I know they liked, but I mean, I don't know what you would even think. This is the biggest yes for me. This is probably, if I were ranking them, I would probably rank this the top need still available.
Yeah, this and cornerback would be 1 and 2 for me, and I got this one in all caps. I'll circle it. I'll underline it 3 times. Yes, the Saints need to address receiver, especially when you look at the guys who were still available. Right now, as far as I know, the Cooper Kupp bidding war is still going on. He's out there. Stephon Diggs has not locked himself back into Houston. He's still out there. Keenan Allen's still out there. Amari Cooper is still out there. Guys who have been there, guys who have done that in
Absolutely.
this league.
That's a great list.
Yeah,
that's exactly what I'm talking about.
It literally checks all the boxes of what you're looking for. Guys who may not be able to go out there and be a game changer, quote unquote, for 17 games, but it's a guy who, if you're game planning for as a defensive coordinator, we need to know where Cooper Kupp is. We need to game plan around Stephon Diggs, because if we let Stephon Diggs go out, he can change the course of this game. And that's a guy who the Saints do not have on this roster, maybe outside Chris Olave. And that's a maybe when it comes to Chris Olave, because all the guys that you name, Rashid Shaheed, when it comes to go routes and going deep, he may be one of the most unstoppable players doing that in the league, but he hasn't necessarily developed that route tree that you would want to see in a player who's been in the league now. I mean, what's he been in, 3-4 years now?
Yeah, and it's going to the final year of his contract, and it's, there's got to be some steady availability when it comes to him as well.
And we had a lot of receivers that had opportunities to step up and
That's
be
it.
that guy
There's
last year.
so many opportunities.
Because there were so many injuries. We saw Cedric Wilson with an opportunity. We saw Equinemius St. Brown have an opportunity. We saw Bub Means have an opportunity, and he did catch that touchdown from Spencer Rattler, but he was injured and he didn't have an opportunity to play consistently enough. Kevin Austin had his chances. Dante Pettis had his chances, but none of them in a team that was begging for somebody to break out and be a receiver was able to do that. The only one who was able to do that is up in Seattle right now, Marquez Valdez-Scantling.
And what was he? He was a veteran that had been through it.
Exactly.
That's what they need in that room.
A free agent that they got in the middle of the season. So, yes, the Saints need a free agent receiver.
All right, we're gonna speed this up a little bit. We're running out of time here. All right, at tackle, Fuaga, Penning, Josiah Ezram, and his name's Ball. I think it was a futures contract guy.
Yeah.
How do you feel about Penning is the key here? I would have no problem if they brought a veteran in, but I could see them targeting a tackle in the draft as well.
I think you've got bigger fish to fry. I think you've got a good foundation. Taliesin Fuaga had a solid rookie season, and Trevor Penning was able to avoid that bust label for another year. He was your most consistent offensive lineman last year, and throughout all the problems on this team, Trevor Penning was not the problem.
No. Guard, center guard. You got McCoy, you got Ruiz, now Will Clapp, Kyle Hergel. To me, this is the one spot I might look inward at either Lucas Patrick or Lemieux. Lemieux is a free agent that's available. Lucas Patrick is a free agent that's available. Patrick's a little bit older. Lemieux was a guy that didn't play center before, but filled in fairly nicely. He's dealt with some injuries. I would like to add another body here. Now, you might look at this in the draft, but I would still add another body here. So yes, I think that is. I would categorize that as still a need for the Saints.
I would do the same, just because that was your most injured unit last year. And when we talk about the lack of depth on the offensive line, that's where it showed with the 2 guards and the center. And that's where you've got your 2 best players on the O-line, and Eric McCoy and Cesar Ruiz.
Yep.
But we saw what happens when those guys go down. I mean, Eric McCoy played 5 games, 7 games.
Yeah, I know he was injured, out, and then
So
came
he played
back
7
and
games
re-injured.
last year, but he played in 4 of their 5 wins
Right.
last year. That's how important Eric McCoy is. So I would definitely want to add more along the interior of that offensive line.
All right, defensive end / edge, Jace Young, Isaiah Foskey, Carl Granderson, Cam Jordan. I'm fine with this room right now. I think you can probably add someone that's probably a little more closer to the ideal prototype in the draft. But you might be able to find a veteran somewhere, but this is a hard position to find in free agency as it is. You are down a guy because you don't have Peyton Turner anymore. So you got basically the same room as a season ago. But I wouldn't characterize this as the biggest need right now on the roster.
If you were coming in with the idea of running a 4-3, I would say no, you're good. But because it's a 3-4 and because we don't know how Carl Granderson will fit into the 3-4, we don't necessarily know how Cam Jordan is going to fit into it. You know, there's so many question marks when it comes to a potential new scheme when it comes to that 3-4. I would look outward, not necessarily because of talent reasons, but because of fit and scheme reasons. I think you can find somebody who can fit the 3-4.
That's probably a guy that's played true 3-4 end or edge out there. So we'll see. Defensive tackle. Now this room is stocked up. Brzee, Godchow, Shepard, Saunders, Ridgeway, and Christian Boyd. So they now officially have more D tackles than defensive ends. I was on the radio earlier on the Matt Moscona show after further review, and he asked me what position would you scratch off for the draft now. I was like, well, I wouldn't scratch off any position because I still think they're going to draft best player. But if you were just looking at the numbers, this is the spot where I feel like they're pretty well stocked right now at defensive tackle.
Yeah, DT, I think we all kind of expected them to make some choices or maybe drop some defensive tackles. What they did was add defensive tackles. So I think DT is probably the position that you're good at. I mean, you've got a Brian Brzee who did take a leap in his second season and is arguably the best player on your entire defense. You've got, you know, veterans like Nathan Shepard, Colin Saunders, you're bringing Godchow. You've got a young guy in Christian Boyd. So I think you're good at DT for now. There's definitely bigger fish to fry, especially on that defense.
All right, kicking over to the linebacker position. There are the, let's see, linebackers, DeMario Davis, Pete Werner, Nephi Sewell, Anthony Orji, Isaiah Stylebird, DeMarco Jackson, Jalen Ford. Now, you hope Jalen Ford can somehow get healthier this year. But the thing with this is, you know, when they've had that third linebacker that could play, I mean, it really helped. I mean, think of Caden Ellis a couple years ago. Yep. Whether or not he fills in to be the starter or to play the Sam position. You know, Willie Gay had his moments last year. I think he overall underwhelmed, but I think he had his moments last year. So I still think, despite the higher number of bodies here, once you get past the first two, I have major question marks for every single one on this list. So I still think linebacker is something you could consider. Also, linebackers are usually some of their biggest special teams guys. So I would still think they would still be looking for a linebacker.
I would definitely add a linebacker because outside of DeMario Davis and Pete Werner, like you said, there's not necessarily anybody who I can say, yeah, we can throw that guy on the field and I'm not worried about him. Especially because I think a guy who is still unsigned at this moment is Isaiah Simmons, the former first-round pick. He was a linebacker in college.
All over the place,
played a little safety. Very versatile player. He played in Arizona when he came into the league, moved to the New York Giants. So he's a player that's actually played against this Philadelphia coaching staff, you know, who was in charge of the Eagles offense. So Isaiah Simmons, I think, would be a great addition that could probably start day one in this linebacker room.
Let's move on to cornerback. Kool-Aid, Alante, Taylor, Isaac, Yadam, Rico Payton, Wright, and Fluellen. They need another player. I think they're going to draft one. I would still add a veteran. They need someone here. And behind the top three, you're not sure. And honestly, your third is probably your fourth best corner. So, and then there's a lot of uncertainty surrounding. I mean, not uncertainty, but you don't know how good Kool-Aid's truly going to be. Is he going to take that leap? So I think they draft one, and I think they still look for one. I think the cornerback position is something they cannot take lightly. So I still think this is a need.
This is probably their biggest need still for me because I don't think you have a true quote-unquote cornerback one. If you're playing against Mike Evans, who's your guy that you send at Mike Evans and say, I need you to handle him today? If you're going against
that probably
Jamar
means you have
Chase,
to go draft then, right? Because I don't think you get one on free agency.
You know, I mean, right now there's still, I've been on Asante Samuel watch. I don't think he's signed anywhere.
Yeah.
Stephon Gilmore right now would step in and be the best cornerback on this team today. He's still got a little bit in the tank. So I think there are corners out there that can help you. And this is a team that needs a corner because, like you said, you're asking Kool-Aid McKinstry to step into a really big role next year that I can't say for certain that he's ready for. And Alante Taylor, it seems like he's been most comfortable in the slot as that nickel corner. So I would like them to bring in a guy who could be more reliable on the outside.
Tell you what, if you added a guy like Asante Samuel with this group, then all of a sudden you feel really good.
Yeah.
If you draft one, you still feel better, but it still be a rookie. So keep an eye on the cornerback room. All right, at safety, you have Reed, Tyrann Mathieu, Jordan Howden, Millard Bradford, and J.T. Gray, the specialist. Probably middle of the pack in terms of need. I mean, the splash signing was obviously Reed and Mathieu. Those are your starters, and Matthew's been an Iron Man since he's been here, and Justin Reed's been pretty durable since he's been in the league as well. Maybe you need a little bit of depth. Maybe that's something you target in the draft because I don't think Howden's really developed the way they'd like him to. So I don't know. I wouldn't say this characterizes as the biggest need, though.
Yeah, I'm good with safety. I think you've got 2 solid starters in Tyrann Mathieu, who still consistently finds himself at or near the top of the interception ratings for the Saints. You've got Justin Reed, great signing there. Jordan Howden, like you said, hasn't necessarily grown to be the player they hoped he could be. You could definitely
He had an opportunity last year. It didn't happen.
He did. That was another guy who, there was a chance to step in and grab that position and say, this is mine. And I think Dennis Allen even talked about that before the season, and nobody really did that outside of Will Harris. So I think you're good at safety for now, but Tyrann's not getting any younger. I think that's a position to address in the draft.
You can get younger there, right. So, yeah, I think, look, you can draft at any one of these positions. I mean, honestly, and you make a case because the future at every position other than maybe left tackle hasn't necessarily been etched in stone. So, but as for immediacy of needs, I go wide receiver 1, cornerback 2. It sounds like you got that flipped. Cornerback 1, wide receiver 2. I need another wide. I need a playmaking wide receiver and a guy that knows what he's doing on the football field because sometimes you get that youth feel with that wide receiver room, and not the good way, where it's just kind of almost like they're lost in the clouds a little bit.
Yeah, I'd probably go cornerback 1, wide receiver 2, and linebacker 3.
Linebacker will be another one, and then honestly, at some point, you have the quarterback discussion as well. So
I think that's one that they table for next year or in the draft.
Maybe so. All right, that was a good discussion.
That was
Ran
fun.
through that pretty quickly. All right, for Andre Johnson Jr., I'm Sean Fazende. We'll catch you guys next time on Overtime.